Welcome to Heart of a Shepherd. I'm coming to you with today's devotional from Exodus chapter 18. The title of the devotional, Does Character Matter? I invite you to look with me in your Bible at Exodus chapter 18. Well, I want to begin with an observation that Exodus 18 represents a family reunion. Now, with the defeat of the Amalekites in Exodus chapter 17, the Lord magnified the standing of Moses and Joshua. Now, the news reached the nations of all that God had done for Moses and for Israel, his people, and how the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. Exodus 18 and verse 1. Well, soon after, Jethro, who is now identified as the priest of Midian and the father-in-law of Moses, journeyed to Israel's encampment at Mount Sinai. Now there Moses was reunited with Zipporah, his wife, and their two sons, Gershom and Eleazar, chapter 18, verses 1 through 5. Well, a beautiful scene unfolds as we are privy to the family reunion and the visible signs of love and respect evidenced by Moses and his father-in-law. Now, although he had proved himself to be a great leader, when Moses learned his father-in-law had come, we read that he honored him and he went out to meet him and he did obeisance. That is, he bowed before his father-in-law and kissed him. Well, what a blessed reunion as Jethro and Moses, verse 7, asked each other of their welfare, and they came into the tent of Moses. Now, we do not know the number of hours that passed as Moses rehearsed all that the Lord had done unto Pharaoh and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, and the travail that had come upon them by the way, and how the Lord delivered them. Now, remember in Moses, when the Lord first called to him from the midst of the burning bush in Exodus 3, I'm sure Jethro took pride in the man who was his son by marriage. Now, Moses shared not only the victories, but in verse 8, all the travail that had come upon them by the way, and how the Lord had delivered them from thirst and hunger, and gave Israel success over the Amalekites. Well, a proud father-in-law indeed, Exodus 18, verses 9 through 12. And so Jethro rejoiced in the Lord's goodness and how he, the Lord, had delivered Israel out of slavery. Now, he declared, and I quote, "Now I know that the Lord is greater than all gods, for in the thing wherein they dealt proudly, he, that is God, was above them, above all Egypt and their gods." Now, though he was a Midianite, that is Jethro, and not numbered among the 12 tribes of Israel, nevertheless, he was a man of faith in the God of Israel. For you understand, the Midianites were descendants of Abraham through his wife Keturah. Now, that's all the way back in Genesis 25. Therefore, Jethro, we read in verse 12 of chapter 18, took a burnt offering and sacrifices for God. And he invited Moses, his brother Aaron, and all the elders of Israel to eat bread before God. Well, beginning in verse 13 through verse 22, we notice the daily toil of leadership. Now, the celebration, we understand, was short-lived. For the next day after Jethro came, Moses returned to his all-consuming task as he, verse 13, sat to judge the people. Well, Jethro looked on as the people gathered from the morning unto the evening, waiting for Moses to weigh their concerns and pass judgment. He, Jethro, then inquired of Moses, and he asked, "What is this thing that thou doest to the people? Why sittest thou thyself alone, and all the people stand by thee from morning until even?" Verse 14. Moses then explained that his role was not to make laws, but to make the statutes of God and his laws known. Jethro, concerned for his son-in-law's well-being, said to Moses, and I quote in verse 18, "This thing is too heavy for thee." Now remember, Moses is now more than 80 years old. And so Jethro continues, "Thou art not able to perform it thyself alone." He proposed there was a better way to judge the people, and that was, quote, teach them ordinances and laws, and show them the way wherein they must walk, and the work that they must do. Verse 20. Well, rather than serve as the judge of the people, Jethro suggested that Moses should be God's mediator. And verse 19 and 20, teach them, the people, ordinances and laws wherein they must walk, and the work that they must do. He then urged Moses in verse 21 and 22 to choose able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness, and place such over them, in verse 22, and let them, the men of truth, who fear God, able men, let them judge the people at all seasons. And it shall be that every great matter they shall bring unto thee, but every small matter, every day-to-day challenges they shall judge, that is, the able men. So shall it be easier for thyself, and they, the people, the men, shall bear the burden with thee. Well, notice then, beginning in verse 23 through verse 26, what I would suggest is this thought: character matters. Now, Moses wisely heeded his father-in-law's counsel, and we read that he did choose able, that is, capable men out of all Israel, and he made them heads over the people, and they judged the people at all seasons, or that is, as the need arose. The hard causes, though, they brought unto Moses, but in every small daily matter they judged themselves. Well, a closing thought. The question: what manner of men were chosen to judge the people? Well, let's go back and review. First, they were men who feared God, that is, they revered Him, indicative of the fact that they walked in His law and commandments. Number two, they were pious, godly men, men of truth, and worthy of trust. Verse 21. Those who sat then in judgment were to hate covetousness, and therefore not favor the poor or the wealthy, the weak or the strong. In verse 21, they were to be men of integrity and above reproach. Well, tragically, in our day, the same cannot be said of men and women in places of authority. How different our society, our world, and even our churches would be if we demanded that those in authority must be, verse 21, able men, such as fear God, men of truth, and hating covetousness. Well, what about you? Do you have the spiritual qualities God seeks so that you may serve Him? You see, after all, character matters. Well, thank you for being a part of our study. We will continue tomorrow with Exodus 19 and Exodus chapter 20. God bless, and bye-bye.